The morning Rachel's life changed forever didn't begin with sunshine or soft music. It began with a cold, angry wind slamming against her face as she rushed down the sidewalk, heels slipping on the wet pavement, her tote bag flapping wildly against her side. She had exactly 4 minutes left to reach the corporate shuttle before it left without her, again, and losing this internship on the first week would mean losing the one chance she had clawed her way toward for years. She didn't see the puddle she stepped in, didn't see the car splashing water as it roared past, and didn't see the man watching her with quiet amusement and unexpected concern from the driver's seat of a waiting black SUV. Later, she would remember only how her heart was pounding, how everything felt like it was falling apart, and how life seemed unfair in every possible way. She didn't know that the driver she was about to snap at wasn't a driver at all. He was the man who owned the company. If you believe in kindness, humanity, and second chances, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. Now let's get into the story. Rachel was 23 and carried the kind of exhaustion that didn't come from lack of sleep but from years of scraping by. Growing up in a small Ohio town with a single mother who worked double shifts meant Rachel learned early that nothing came easy and nothing came without sacrifice. Winning a competitive internship at Barrett Industries, a major tech firm in Chicago, felt like her life's biggest victory. But victories came with pressure, and pressure often felt like drowning. When she finally reached the shuttle, drenched and breathless, a man in a simple black jacket opened the rear door for her. He looked maybe early 30s, tall, with dark hair slightly tousled like he didn't put much thought into it, and eyes that were far too kind for the job she assumed he had. He greeted her with a small nod as she hopped in, muttering something like, "Thanks," without making eye contact, still too flustered to be polite. The rest of the interns whispered among themselves, and Rachel could feel the tension in the air. Barrett Industries was known for being cutthroat, and every one of them was desperately trying to impress. To them, the man driving was invisible. That was how corporate life worked. People only saw the ones above them, never the ones who kept the world turning behind the scenes. But not Rachel. She noticed the little things. The way he checked the mirrors twice before pulling out. The way he waited patiently for a pedestrian who didn't even glance his way. The way he didn't roll his eyes when the interns barked orders like he was simply part of the seatbelts and steering wheel. On the third morning, when rain clouds were replaced with biting winter wind, Rachel lingered a moment outside the shuttle, rubbing warmth into her hands. He stepped out, handed her a small cup of hot coffee, and said softly, "You look like you might need this." She stared at him, startled. The cup wasn't from some fancy cafe. It looked like gas station coffee, the kind people drank when they cared more about surviving the morning than impressing anyone. She smiled for the first time that week, and he smiled back. The other interns didn't notice. Over the next few days, she learned his name, Ethan. He only offered it after she asked with genuine curiosity. She didn't pry about his life, didn't ask him why someone who seemed educated, thoughtful, and strangely composed was chauffeuring interns around Chicago. She simply spoke to him like he mattered. That was enough to make him look at her differently. They talked about small things at first, how Chicago winters came too early, how the city looked like a postcard at night, how everyone was always in a hurry, but beneath those small moments lived something deeper. Rachel didn't know it, but Ethan felt seen, something rare for someone in his position, someone used to being misjudged, underestimated, and treated like a mere service provider when he chose to blend into the background. One evening, Rachel stayed late at the office, too scared to leave unfinished work on her boss's desk. When she finally exited the building, exhausted and clutching her laptop to her chest, she found Ethan waiting by the curb. "You didn't have to," she said, surprised. "I know," he replied, "but I didn't want you walking 5 blocks alone this late." Her heart softened in a way she couldn't quite explain. Inside the SUV, the city lights washed through the windows, painting his face in soft reflections. She found herself studying him. His posture wasn't hunched like someone used to taking orders. His watch wasn't cheap. His eyes held a quiet confidence that didn't match the job she assumed he had. And yet, she didn't question it. Everyone had a story. Maybe this was his. Weeks passed, and Ethan became the brightest part of her mornings. She laughed more, worked harder, and felt genuinely hopeful for the first time in years. She looked forward to seeing him, hearing him, sharing small pieces of their lives on the drive. She began to notice how he listened, not with the intention to respond, but to understand. That kind of listening was rare, But life, as always, had its storms. One icy morning, an intern named Chelsea, sharp-tongued, privileged, and constantly competing, noticed the way Rachel smiled at Ethan when she entered the shuttle. "Ah, how cute," Chelsea whispered loudly. "Rachel's trying to impress the driver. Sweetie, you can date up, you know." The interns laughed. Rachel felt her cheeks burn. Before she could respond, Ethan spoke, voice calm but edged with something firm. "Respect goes both ways," he said softly. "Maybe remember that." Chelsea rolled her eyes. "Relax, you're getting paid either way." Something inside Rachel twisted. She hated moments like this, moments where kindness was mistaken for weakness. That night, she cried in her tiny studio apartment, feeling foolish for caring so much. She told herself he was just being nice. She reminded herself they were from different worlds. She scolded her heart for being naive. The next morning, she apologized to him for the intern's behavior. "You don't owe me an apology," he said. "You treat people well. That says everything about you." His words healed something in her, but the universe wasn't finished with its surprises. One Thursday afternoon, the interns were escorted upstairs for a special company meeting. Rachel entered the large conference hall and nearly dropped her notebook when she saw him, Ethan, standing at the front of the room beside the executive board. He wasn't wearing the black jacket. He wasn't holding car keys. He was wearing a tailored suit, speaking quietly with senior directors, standing with the posture of someone who belonged at the top of the pyramid, not behind a steering wheel. Before she could process it, the CEO stepped up to the podium. "Most of you already know our founder's son and co-owner, Ethan Barrett," he announced. "He's been conducting an internal assessment of company culture these past weeks." Rachel stopped breathing. The room erupted with whispers. "Co-owner? Founder's son? Assessment?" Ethan's eyes found hers across the room, not with arrogance, not with triumph, but with an apology, a soft, sincere apology. After the meeting, he approached her quietly in the hallway, while the interns buzzed in shock around them. "I should have told you," he said gently. "I didn't hide it to deceive you. I wanted to see how people treated someone they thought wasn't important. And I didn't expect to meet someone like you." It wasn't the revelation that stunned her. It was the vulnerability in his voice. He wasn't the driver, he owned the company, and she had treated him like a human being, when others treated him like furniture or like royalty, depending on what they saw. Rachel felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She didn't know what she was supposed to feel. Shock, embarrassment, anger, maybe all three. But what she felt most was fear. Fear that everything between them had only existed because she didn't know the truth. Fear that now she did know things would never be the same. For the next week, she avoided him. Not out of spite, but because she needed to breathe. She needed to understand whether her heart liked Ethan the man or Ethan the millionaire. But he didn't give up. One evening, she found a note slipped under her laptop at her desk. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't flowery. It simply read, "If you ever want to talk, not as an owner and intern, but as two people who met in the winter, I'll be waiting by the Riverwalk at 7. She almost didn't go. Almost. But something inside her whispered that life rarely placed people like him in front of people like her twice. She found him sitting on a bench, watching the frozen river. No suit, no chauffeur posture. Just the man who once handed her gas station coffee because he noticed she was shivering. He stood when she approached. "I'm sorry," he said, "for not telling you sooner. But everything I said to you, everything I felt with you, that was real. With you, I wasn't a Barrett. I wasn't a billionaire. I was just me." Rachel sat beside him, hands trembling inside her coat pockets. She realized then that what mattered wasn't what he owned. It was who he became when she spoke to him, and who she became when he looked at her. They talked for hours, not about money, not about status, but about childhoods, dreams, fears, and the loneliness that sometimes came from having too little, or having too much. By the time they stood to leave, the city lights reflecting on the icy water, she felt a warmth settle inside her chest. Not certainty, but possibility. A week later, everyone in the company knew they were together. Some whispered, some judged, some envied. But Rachel didn't care. She had walked through storms tougher than opinions. She held her head high, knowing she loved the man. Not the empire he came from. And Ethan, he adored her. Not because she needed him, but because she didn't. She chose him with open eyes, knowing everything, and still saw the same man she once found quietly holding a coffee cup in the cold. As winter melted into spring, their bond grew, not in grand gestures or lavish gifts, but in shared coffee, late-night walks, whispered fears, and gentle promises. Theirs wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better, something real. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And before we close, special request, comment below. Would you ever give someone a chance if you first misjudged them? Rachel's life didn't become perfect, but it became honest, warm, and deeply alive. And every once in a while, when people asked her how she met the love of her life, she would smile and say, "I thought he was just the driver. Turns out, he was driving my life toward everything I never knew I deserved."